Well, welcome back to GB 102 Bible Backgrounds. As always, I'm your instructor, Corey Allen, and in this lecture, we will be discussing some of the introductory factors concerning the geography of the Levant. In particular, I want to introduce you all to this idea that the Levant is a in-between place. And I do believe that the best way to demonstrate this is by explaining how the factors of geography, biogeography, climate, and social-political forces have shaped the world of the Bible. Also, keep in mind that since this will be your introduction to many of these ideas, this lecture will largely be a survey, something to whet your appetite for further study. And additionally, since this is just a survey, we will be viewing this information with a relatively low degree of magnification. As we progress through the course, we will nuance a lot of these concepts further. But for the moment, let's just kind of build a solid foundation of how geography can help us read the Bible better. Many of you are no doubt familiar with the popular description that the Levant is a land flowing with milk and honey. Deuteronomy 26:9 puts it this way, "And then he brought us to this place and gave us this land, a land flowing with, well, milk and honey." And this phrase will come up in the Bible about 20 times. And in most cases, it is meant to be a positive appraisal of the kind of land Israel is on. And I find that most students, when they hear this term, they begin picturing this kind of pastoral and agrarian setting. And then they're frequently surprised by just how rich and varied the land actually is. For example, all four of the places that are pictured in this slide can be found inside the Levant. Tall mountains over 8,000 feet in elevation, barren deserts rife with asps and scorpions, fertile meadows that are just filled with grains, fruits, and farming possibilities, and yes, even small lakes with pleasant shores surrounded by cliffs. In short, you can find nearly every kind of terrain in the Levant. So we will need to develop a few schemas for how we talk about the land. And our first schema will be derived from the scientific discipline known as geology. For a simple definition, we will say that geology is the study of the physical nature and history of the earth. In most high school curriculums, they usually limit this study to the simple identification of types of rocks and minerals. But the benefit for a study like this is that we can begin to predict where people will live and what sorts of lifestyles they will exhibit based on geological factors. You may not have thought about this before, but did you know that the ground beneath your feet affects most of the major decisions you have made in your life? Here's an example. I lived in the city of Cincinnati along the Ohio River, and I was there for about 10 years. During that time, I frequently wondered, why did Cincinnati become a big city with millions of people living in it, while other towns that were established along the Ohio River at the exact same time didn't become big cities? What made that city special? Well, then a teacher, a geology teacher by the name of Dr. Bullard, gave me a very satisfactory answer when he told me Cincinnati was built on a higher floodplain, and the bedrock beneath the city is more resistant to erosion. In summary, Cincinnati could become a large city, and the other towns didn't, because the geology gave Cincinnati a distinct advantage. It offered opportunities for humans that lived there in ways that other places did not. Now let's apply this idea to farming. Sometimes bedrock contains more nutrients for plants than others. And in the Levant, some areas that will get the exact same amount of rainfall, but the ground itself will limit what sorts of plants that can be grown there. So all totaled, the locations of cities, the availability of food, and even major lifestyle choices, for example, whether one chooses to become a farmer or a shepherd, will frequently depend on the geology of an area. So any discussion of geology usually has to begin with the theory of what's called plate tectonics. Most scientists believe that the Earth's solid crust is a thin layer of rock that floats on a superheated mantle of liquid rock. It may help you to picture the Earth as an egg. It has a hard shell, i.e. the crust, and a superheated yolk, with the whites being the mantle and the dense thick yellow being the core. But every now and then we start to see this liquid rock burst onto the surface in the form of lava when a volcano erupts. If this crust were one solid piece, the entire Earth, the land itself, would be relatively stable. But instead what we find is that this crust is cracked and it's divided into large plates that are very slowly moving, and we can measure the rates that they move. Now, the Levant, our area of study, rests, and I use that term very loosely, but it rests in an area where the Arabian, African, and Eurasian plates meet. And this makes the entire region geologically unstable. It's prone to earthquakes and even volcanic activity. Additionally, the Arabian plate is moving east. The African plate is moving west, and this is creating a rather large crack. In fact, it's so big, this crack can be seen from outer space. And speaking of which, this is a satellite view of the Levant. Notice that long, dark line in the center of the red oval here in this picture. That is the Great Rift Valley. Eventually, this valley spreads out and becomes what's known as the Gulf of Aqaba, or the eastern arm of the Red Sea, that dark area there below the crack. And this rift divides the Levant in two, and the Jordan River, the Dead Sea, and the Sea of Galilee are all right there in the middle of it. And because of this, the Jordan River is basically the dividing line in the Levant. With the west side, it will be known as the Cisjordan, while the east side will be known as Transjordan. So now that you've got that idea down, let's try to represent that information on a map. So press pause for a moment and download a copy of the map entitled Levant Trends Map. When you find it, it should look identical to the map that we have displayed here on the side. I'll even play some theme music while you find it.
If there's a place you gotta go, I'm the one you need to know. I'm the map. I'm the map, I'm the map. If there's a place you gotta get, I can get you there, I bet. I'm the map. I'm the map, 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 I'm the map!
So let's begin by orienting ourselves to this map by locating the major bodies of water. When drafting a map, I usually find it helpful to begin by labeling these major bodies of water, and this is usually made easy on Levant maps because the large Mediterranean Sea usually takes up a big chunk of the western end of the map. So go ahead and mark the Mediterranean Sea in blue, as I have done here. Next, find the Orontes River and trace it. This connects to the Mediterranean Sea itself. Alright, next, trace that large forking river up in the northeast side of the map. This is the Euphrates River. And now finally, color in the two small gray bodies of water at the southern end of the map. The smaller one is the Sea of Galilee. The larger one is the Dead Sea. And now finally, trace the Jordan River connecting the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea. These are the major bodies of water in the Levant. So now let's get out a different color and mark the mountain ranges. The mountain chains are the long lines that run usually north to south. Some of them go diagonally, but largely they're running north to south. The takeaway from all of this is that it is relatively easy to move in a north-south direction in the Levant, so long as you are traveling with the grain of the mountains. However, crossing one of these solid lines requires substantially more effort. or it requires a person to find a lowland depression that accommodates east and west travel. So go ahead and mark your mountains here. Alright, now let's mark the Great Rift Valley, that large crack in the Earth's crust that can be seen from space. This is the hardest obstacle to cross in the Levant. How hard is this barrier to cross? Well, let's just say that entire nations, even today, use this rift as a natural boundary. After you've marked the Great Rift, pencil in somewhere to the west of the Jordan River that this is the Cisjordan side. After that, mark on your map somewhere to the east of the Jordan River that is the Transjordan side. I will be using these two terms fairly frequently throughout class, so you will need to register pretty much instantly which side is the Cisjordan, which is the west, and which side is the Transjordan, which is the east. And finally, let's mark the areas where east-west travel is made, we'll call it kinda sorta possible. Not easy, but possible. And these are the natural valleys and depressions that run east-west in the Levant. The furthest south we have the Beersheba or Beersheba corridor, and this is represented by the dotted lines that are furthest to the south. Go ahead and mark them in a different color there. Next, a little to the north, we find the Jezreel Valley Depression. And further north to that, we have the Kadesh corridor. And then finally, all the way up north there by the Euphrates River, we have the Euphrates Depression. And again, I don't think I can stress this enough, but if you want to travel along an east-west axis, if a person wants to travel from the east to the west or from west to east in the Levant, you're probably traveling by one of these four routes, or you are basically making a Herculean effort to climb some mountains in order to travel. So let's see how we did on the Levant Trends map. Your finished map should resemble something close to what I have here on the slide. Now, since this is our first map, I need to express something very important. These maps are completed on an honor system. I'm never going to ask you to turn in these maps, but I will test you to see that you know how to use the maps and that you are making these maps a useful resource to yourself. And this testing will come in the form of quizzes, and it will also be shown on your final project. So it will become very painfully obvious to me which students are actually doing their map work and which ones are not. So as your professor, take some time and actually fill out these maps. Make them colorful, make them pleasant to look at, because quite frankly, I want you to be looking at them. I want you to study them. Look at them more than once. If we've went through the trouble to give a place a name, to locate it, to actually find where it is on the map, that's usually a good clue that it will show up somewhere, sometime on a quiz. So, while we're already on a roll, and hopefully you now have some confidence in doing this map work for the class, let's try a different map. This time, go to the Levant Geology map from your resources section on the LMS. And as before, with each map, you get the Dora Explorer theme music.
If there's a place you gotta go, I'm the one you need to know. I'm the map. I'm the map, I'm the map. If there's a place you gotta get, I can get you there, I bet. I'm the map. I'm the map, 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 I'm the map!
So, now that we've seen how the movement of the Earth's crust affects travel in the Levant, let's find out how the basic rock structures affect human living conditions. In this part of the lecture, we will concern ourselves with the study of what's known as bedrock. And when I say bedrock, I'm referring to the solid rock that underlies the dirt, the sand, the clay. It's the solid mass of rock just below the surface. And bedrock is important to the study because as it erodes, as it breaks down, it creates different kinds of soils. And these soils can dictate what kind of plants and animals can be supported in a region. In the Levant, there are 9 major geological formations, and each one has a radical impact on the flora, fauna, and other factors of the area. And we will divide these into 2 major groups. There are 7 sedimentary bedrock formations, and there are 2 igneous or fire-created bedrock formations. And for this lecture, I just want you to learn the names of these formations, and I want you to be able to say whether these rock structures make for good farming, for good building materials, or for both. And later we will discuss the locations of these bedrocks, but for now I just want us to focus on the possibilities and or limitations that these geological forces place on human life. So the most recent type of bedrock deposit that we have is a type of deposit known as alluvium. It is created when other forms of bedrock break down and then travel downhill, either because rainwater has pushed it downhill, river water has moved it downhill, but in either case, this alluvium mingles at the bottom in these low areas. And so go ahead, pause the lecture, and shade these areas brown, as I have shown on the slide. All of these areas are the alluvial plains in the Levant. Now, alluvial plains and alluvial soils are important because they are usually wonderful for farming. They are able to sustain the widest variety of fruits and vegetables. However, alluvium does not make for a good building material. So the people that live in these areas have really one of 2 choices if they're wanting to build houses, dwellings, and other buildings. They either have to grow trees to produce wood, or they have to get stone or other building materials from somewhere else if they want to have a substantial dwelling. Now, a second type of recent deposit that is found in the Levant is what we'll call Dune Sand. And this is largely a coastal phenomenon, and it's created by ocean tides and waves that are washed up on shore, and they leave sandy sediments on the ground. So let's pause the lecture here, and let's color this section a sandy yellow color. And this picture here of a place known as Gush Katif shows Dune Sand in all of its glory. And I'm pretty sure I know what you're thinking. Man, Dune Sand looks like a desert. And you aren't mistaken. It's nearly impossible to get this kind of soil to do anything good, whether for farming or for building. Now, a shepherd may be able to find a decent meal for his flock from the shrubs that grow in this kind of soil, but for the most part, these areas will be fairly barren and uninhabited. So now, the final and of the recent types of bedrock deposits in the Levant is known as red sand. Like dune sand, it was deposited by ocean waves, and it is therefore only found in the coastal areas of the Levant. And it also makes for kind of shoddy building material. And this was such common knowledge that in biblical times, Jesus readily used this image of a house built on sand to make the point that only a spiritually foolish person would do such a thing. So, quote, "Everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain fell, the floods came, and the winds beat against the house, and it collapsed and was utterly destroyed." So with these words of Jesus, take a moment and reflect on that, and as you do so, go ahead and pause and color this area in an orangish color. Well, building and construction concerns aside, red sand is much more valuable than dune sand, largely because red sand has much more nutrients and is therefore much more attractive as farmland. And citrus fruits will grow well in this region, as will olives and other tropical plants such as palm trees. All of these grow well in red sandy areas. So those were the recent deposits: red sand, dune sand, and alluvial soils. But now let's move to some of the more ancient forms of bedrock in the Levant. The most common of this is a type of limestone. It's a hard limestone known as Cenomanian Limestone. This limestone makes up the bulk of the central ridge that includes the lands of Judea and Samaria. Now, this term Cenomanian is a somewhat loaded term because, well, geologists will use this term to denote a time period that occurred millions of years ago. And they make this assessment based on the types of fossils they find inside Cenomanian limestone. Here, though, I'm using this term because it is simply the way geologists talk about this kind of rock. But I'm not necessarily endorsing an evolutionary worldview. So, with that disclaimer out of the way, pause the video here and let's color this area a dark green. Now, Cenomanian limestone makes for an excellent building material. In fact, it can usually last for thousands of years. It's also a light yellow in color, and the city of Jerusalem actually has an official ordinance or law that all houses have to have their outsides faced with this type of stone. And this is partially how Jerusalem got the city nickname, Jerusalem the Golden, because every city, every tower, every wall, every house is just coated with this veneer, this outside layer of this Cenomanian limestone. And important to us farmers out there, Cenomanian limestone, when it erodes, often results in a rich reddish brown type of soil known as terra rosa or red earth. And this type of soil is excellent for farming Mediterranean types of fruits and vegetables. But you have to have the dedication to plow it because Cenomanian limestone is also fairly hard. It takes a lot of effort to plow these areas. It takes a lot more effort to farm these areas. But the payoff is often better produce. But there's also a second type of limestone. This is also a very substantial deposit, and it's a soft limestone, often known as Eocene Limestone. Now, this kind of limestone is also quite porous. It has a lot of holes in it, and it lets water in and out a lot more readily. Additionally, it's often mixed with minerals like flint, making it flaky and easy to break off. And therefore, it's not a great building material. And also, it's relatively soft, which compared to Cenomanian limestone makes it easier to plow. But it does not produce the fertile terra rosa soil either. So in this regard, there's a trade-off. A farmer can plow this bedrock with much less effort. The farming here is not effortless, but it is certainly easier than places built on Cenomanian limestone. But the overall potential of the soil is less. You're not going to produce as big of a crop. You're not going to produce as healthy of a crop on this kind of soil. And because Eocene limestone is so flaky and brittle, it erodes faster than Cenomanian limestone. So it is often found in transitional areas between mountain ridges and down in lower alluvial valleys. And many of Israel's wars with the Philistines ended up being waged in these transitional areas between the high rocky Cenomanian limestone ridge up on Judea and Samaria and the low fertile alluvial plain of the Philistines down by the coast. So our next major stratum is chalky deposits of chalk and sometimes chert. And it's almost as common as Cenomanian limestone. However, chalk is significantly softer than both Eocene and Cenomanian limestone, and therefore makes for a very poor building material. And additionally, when it erodes and when it breaks down, chalk is a very, very poor retainer of nutrients. It literally just seeps right out of the soil. And so not many farms are going to be located on top of a chalky deposit. So let's go ahead and pause and color that area purple because, well, I like the color purple, and I think those chalky areas need something positive to boost their self-esteem. But because of all these factors that chalk makes for poor farmland, it makes for poor building materials, the areas that have large chalky deposits tend to be some of the most barren in all of the Levant. Just for an example, when Jesus is in the wilderness of Judea, it's a desert where Jesus fasted for 40 days. And literally, it is littered with millions of these chalky rocks. So, when Satan tempted Jesus to turn the rocks into bread, he certainly had a ton of choices and not much civilization to point in any direction. And so, keep in mind that there is a difference between wilderness and desert. Deserts tend to be sandy, and they tend to be built on a different type of bedrock, whereas wilderness tends to be on these chalky deposits where just it is difficult to get anything to grow. So, common mostly to the Transjordan side of the Levant, we will find our seventh and final type of sedimentary rock formation, and this is known as Nubian Sandstone. This rock makes for a very, very resilient and beautiful kind of reddish white variegated building material. I mean, this stuff is absolutely gorgeous. So let's color that area in red to help your memory. And here is an example of work in Nubian Sandstone, here along the cliffs of the Great Rift Valley. And we see cities like this. This is taken from the city of Petra. Specifically, this is a monastery in the city of Petra. And you notice that this building has been carved directly into the cliff face. Instead of moving the stone, we've just basically figured the stone's already there. Let's just cut our building directly into it. And it takes monumental effort to move sandstone. And so frequently you will only find sandstone buildings along the Transjordan side of the Levant. So let's shift gears here and talk about igneous bedrock formations. You see, not all rock formations are formed by erosion. Black basalt is our first type here, and it's a very hard igneous rock that was created by the slow cooling of lava just after reaching the Earth's surface. It is usually found in places like the Anti-Lebanon Mountains, and it is black, it's bubbly, it's bulbous, and this indicates that it cooled very, very quickly. But not quite so fast as a rock like obsidian, which basically has to reach the Earth's surface and cool almost instantly. Additionally, basalt can make for some very, very rich farmland, but you have to have the patience to plow it. It's even harder to plow than Cenomanian Limestone. And furthermore, the rock is so hard that it's frequently quarried and turned into building materials and tools of all kinds, like this basalt olive press that I have pictured here to the right. Millstones are also frequently made from this dense and heavy rock, and this was a well-known fact in Jesus' time, as he readily made use of this fact when he taught, quote, "But if anyone causes these little children to stumble, one of these who believes in me, and causes them to sin, it would be better for him to have had a millstone hung around his neck, and that he be drowned in the open sea." And so, picture that just for a second, of this heavy, heavy rock that we've turned into a tool. But Jesus says, you know, it would be better if something like this was tied around your neck and thrown into the sea if you caused someone to sin. A very graphic image, and also one that anyone who lived in this area, who was used to seeing millstones made of this rock, would have instantly picked up on. So our ninth and final type of bedrock formation that is found in the Levant is a type of rock called Pre-Cambrian Granite. This is the oldest rock layer that is found in the area, and it's exceptionally hard. It's sturdy, and as a building material, it is excellent. It is also slightly pinkish in color, and like Cenomanian Limestone, this stuff will last for thousands of years, millennia if you will. The color is So let's go ahead and color this area in, and we'll do that in a bright Hello Kitty shade of pink. Well, unless you're the kind of guy who's allergic to that, then feel free to use black or something. But go ahead and color this in, and notice that it's a very small section there in the south of the map. And that small section should help you keep in mind that granite is rare in the Levant. It really only shows up in very small nodes along the cliffs of what's known as the Wadi Arava in the very far south. And so places with granite buildings or statues have usually had to import that stone from a great distance. They either had to import it from the Wadi Arava or from somewhere else, like in Asia Minor or in northern Greece. So anytime in our study that we see a building that has a granite monument or granite pillars, understand that somebody had to drop some serious cash. Just a lot of money had to be invested in order to move that stone to where it is currently standing. So to wrap up this first section on geology, let me summarize by saying that when it comes to geology, the land of the Levant is not homogeneous. It's not just a single type of bedrock. A fertile vineyard may only be separated from a desert-like sand dune by a few miles, and the underlying bedrock is partially responsible for this. And this will be the first way I would like to suggest that the Levant is a land in between. It is a land in between geological possibilities and geological constraints. So now that we're done, let's see how well we did on our map. Your map should look something similar to the map that is here on the right if you were using the same color scheme that I've been using throughout. And when we explore specific areas, I will usually begin by noting what kind of bedrock is just under the surface. So learn these 9 terms at least as well as you can, so that you will not have to keep pausing the video and review your notes every time, because we will be going through some of these areas pretty rapidly. For quizzes, I won't have you fill out this map, but I may ask you questions like, list the 4 types of bedrock in the Levant that make for good building materials, and at which point you would simply respond as your answer: Cenomanian Limestone, Black Basalt, Nubian Sandstone, and Pre-Cambrian Granite. Okay, so with that big old map out of the way, let's take a deep breath and let's shift gears to another schema, or a different way of understanding the land of the Levant. And this schema is a schema of biogeography. Now, in this class, we will be using the definition that biogeography is the study of the distribution of plants and animals. And this can be further subdivided into zoogeography, or animal distribution, and phytogeography, or plant distribution. So, when biologists assess biogeographical data, they will often classify areas based on their flora, their plants, and their fauna, their animals. And they will call these regions that they classify biomes. Now, for our study today, we are going to look at the 3 most common types of biomes in the Levant. And yes, that will mean we need one more map. Now, the good thing for you is that this will be our final map for this lecture, and it is relatively simple compared to our last map that we had to put together. And like any good workout, most of our map assignments will follow this kind of format. We will start off with something easy, we will move to something difficult, and then we'll try to finish with something easy again. Like before, you will find this map in the resources section of your LMS under the title Levant Biogeography Map. And you'll need 3 colors for this map, so I recommend green, yellow, and brown, because we're going to talk about places where life flourishes, places where life barely survives, and places where life rarely survives without serious intervention. And I think you'll find those 3 colors appropriate.
I'm the map, 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 I'm the map!
The most common type of biome in the Levant is what we know as a Mediterranean zone. these zones tend to be teeming with life and agricultural possibilities. And unlike Israel's neighbors like Egypt to the south, and Assyria, Babylon, and Mesopotamia, all those areas to the east, they heavily rely on river water. Egypt has the Nile, Mesopotamia has the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers. But Mediterranean zones are almost entirely powered by rainwater. So Mediterranean zones are known for having what we'll call a thick food system. You can grow fruits, vegetables, grains, trees, and a whole host of other plant and animal life can be made possible simply because there is enough rainfall to support them all. In general, a Mediterranean zone has to receive 12 inches or more of rain every year in order to support this kind of ecosystem. So let's discuss how rainfall actually gets to the Levant. In this map, we basically, all of these circles indicate places where storms form and which directions they go. And storms typically start in the Mediterranean Sea somewhere near Spain, just off the coast of Spain, south of France. And there are about 60 such storms that form there per year. And only about 20 of these make their way all the way across the Mediterranean Sea and make landfall in the Levant. And as a general rule of thumb, those storms that make landfall tend to travel to the north. And so the further to the north in the Levant you travel, the more precipitation that area is likely to receive. And voila! As this map shows, the northern areas of Israel and Lebanon usually receive a lot of rainfall. Sometimes they'll receive 70 or more inches of rain a year. And that will make these areas highly productive Mediterranean zones. Now, you start moving further south, when you get to the middle of the Levant, that number is going to drop drastically, sometimes 30 inches or less. And you notice eventually the green in this map stops. And when you start to get to the far south, or as the Hebrews call it, the Negev, sometimes these areas get 2 inches of rain or less every year. And also notice that there's a dry spot right there in the middle, kind of dividing this Mediterranean zone. And that dry spot is the Great Rift Valley with the Jordan River there in the middle of it. So go ahead, pause the video, and shade this area green, as I have shown here. These are the Mediterranean zones and are zones of possibility for life. So now let's talk about that dry spot right in the middle of the Mediterranean zone that is right in the dead center of the Great Rift Valley. That dry spot is caused by a phenomenon which is known as rain shadow. As a storm comes off the Mediterranean Sea, the winds propel it east. And eventually those storms are going to reach the mountains in the central ridge. And when they do, they will have a tendency to drop most of their moisture on the west side of the mountain. The cloud just simply won't climb over the mountain effectively, and it will drop all of its moisture, all of its rain on the west side. The east side, which will also be called the lee side of the mountain, will get remarkably less rain, and it will stay very dry. And for this reason alone, most mountain-based settlements in the Levant you'll find will be on the west side of the mountain ridges, whereas the east side will be drier and barren. And you can see this today in most mountains in the Levant. If you look to the west, you will see settlements, you'll see farms. You look to the east, and all of a sudden it will look dry, kind of barren and unsettled. So often as you start to head south and east from Mediterranean zones, the vegetation will start to give way. It'll become less and less dense, and then finally we can't call it a Mediterranean zone anymore. And in this transitional zone, we start to call these steppes or marginal zones. And these zones are usually classified by biologists as a zone that receives somewhere between 12 and 4 inches of rain every year. And these zones are typified by arid conditions, and agricultural products that can grow here are often hardy grains, your wheats, your barleys. And more likely, however, if you're going to do any agriculture in a place like this, you're going to herd sheep or goats, kind of hardy animals that will eat these strong and hardy grains, these strong grasses that can survive on less rain. So it comes as no surprise then that in marginal zones, the people often opt to live a Bedouin lifestyle, and they will raise flocks, and they'll move these flocks from place to place just to find enough grass and water, and then they'll move on to the next little pond or oasis, or the next hill that looks like it's growing a little grass here and there. So in such places, the management of your resources is crucial. And if you're raising flocks, your primary staples, or things that will support your bedrock of your diet, as it were, are going to be things like milk, cheese, curds, also known as cottage cheese. And these kind of renewable resources that come from animals will become the primary food components for people that live this kind of lifestyle. And keep in mind that living in a steppe zone is difficult. It doesn't rule out the possibility of sustained human habitation, but it's not easy either. And these places do receive some annual rainfall, so when it does rain, dry riverbeds, also known as wadis, will refresh themselves and start to flow for short periods of time. And this is how herders will live their life. They will simply know that a rainstorm has happened, and they will go seeking where the water is flowing. So go ahead and pause our video here and color this section yellow. That should help you remember that this indicates that life can happen here, but not easily. So our last biome we need to cover is something known as desert zones. And these are areas of impossibility. These places receive less than 4 inches of rainfall per year, and in some of the more extreme cases can go for several years and never see a single drop of rain. These areas are very, very desolate, and only the most stalwart human beings ever choose to live in these areas for any length of time. And like living in a marginal zone, travel through a desert requires very strict conservation of resources and a detailed plan for how you're going to travel from spot to spot where water is accessible. And in general, because of this, travel by camel caravans is still the most common way to travel through a desert zone, even today. And as we noted before, these desert zones are located in the south and in the very far east of the Levant. This southern and eastern desert barrier is going to form the second way in which the Levant is a land that is in between. Simply put, the Levant is a very fertile strip of land that is situated in between the Mediterranean Sea to the west and a nearly insurmountable desert to the east and to the south. So go ahead and pause this video one last time here and color this section brown, indicating that life is near impossible to sustain in these areas. So, as always, let's check our work. When completed, this third map should resemble the colored map that I posted on the right side of this slide. So, with your map work done for today, let's shift gears one last time and talk about one final way that the Levant is a land in between. Now, in this slide here, we have a world map. And I know what you're thinking. I don't think I've ever seen a world map that looks like this. And your eyes are not fooling you. This is a very highly stylized world map. It comes from a German manuscript that was drawn sometime around 1580. And the artist is not very concerned with detail. In fact, the artist has drawn the continents of Europe, Africa, and Asia as a flower, and that specifically those 3 continents are the petals on the flower. So what's that in the center that's holding all 3 of these continents together? Well, in this map, the artist has depicted the city of Jerusalem as the center of the world. Now, again, keep in mind, a traveler is not going to reach for this map to guide them to travel from one place or another. No, the purpose of this map is to make a theological statement that Jerusalem is the most important place in the world. Now, let us use a much more accurate map, but let us use that map to make the same point. All of these arrows on this map represent major travel routes in between the continents of Europe, Africa, and Asia. And notice from any direction, whether you're traveling by land or by sea, all of these routes converge in that yellow circled area, which is the Levant. And as far as travel is concerned, the Levant is literally a land bridge, and it connects these three continents as well as the Arabian Peninsula together. And because of this, the world powers in Africa, such as Egypt, and the world powers in Asia, such as Assyria, Persia, Babylon, and even the world powers in Europe, such as Greece and Rome, all found it extremely important to conquer the area in this circled area. Why? Because they're wanting to control the flow of goods and the flow of people in between the continents. So I would like to suggest that this made the Levant, and the people of Israel in particular, a sandwich. Now, you know how a sandwich works, right? It was invented by John Montagu, the Earl of Sandwich. No, seriously, look it up. I'm not making this up. And the point of a sandwich is simple. You put meat in between bread in order to make it a finger food. Now, again, we all know our history. Eventually, places like Subway started putting all kinds of condiments and salad fixings on these sandwiches to distract people from what was important, the meat and the bread. But the principle is still the same. So for Israel, who understood themselves as God's chosen people, as far as they were concerned, if they were a sandwich, they were the meat on this sandwich. But they were surrounded by some very heavy-hitting and high-carbohydrate bread on every side. They had Egypt to the south, Assyria, Babylon, and Persia to the east, the Hittites and the Greeks to the north, and the Romans to the west. All of these were world-class nations, and they were constantly conquering the Levant because they wanted to control the trade routes, the people, and even the culture. But additionally, Israel was also surrounded by smaller people groups, and these people groups even became a distraction to them. The Canaanites, the Edomites, the Moabites, the Ammonites, the Phoenicians, the Philistines, all of these smaller people groups that live much closer to Israel than their world power neighbors, these groups form the lettuce, the tomatoes, and the cheese of this sandwich. And they will constantly challenge Israel's loyalty to the Lord, Yahweh, or Adonai, their God. And so this was Israel's political situation for almost 1,500 years. They're a small nation, and they're beset on all sides by enemy people groups. They are a tiny nation, and they have rivals in every direction, north, south, east, and west. So, to sum it up, Israel is a land in between. In terms of geology, it is a land in between feast and famine, as the bedrock places both opportunities and constraints on human habitation. In terms of biogeography, the Levant is a fertile strip of land in between the Mediterranean Sea and the desert. And in terms of geopolitical boundaries, the Levant is a land bridge stuck right in between Europe, Asia, and Africa. So it's not just a land of milk and honey. The Levant offers some serious challenges and dynamic possibilities as well for any of the people who would call this place their home.